Disney villainous Wicked to the Core has 2 or 3 villains playing and manipulating to foil each other's plans and fulfill their own. I explained how Disney Villainous's gameplay works in my Evil Comes Prepared review back in March 2020. I'll link to that video at the end of this one and just focus on what the new villains bring to the table. Dr. Facilier or his opponents will sometimes place cards in his fortune deck. This is a face-up pile and will be used when you play The Cards Will Tell. Shuffle the fortune pile, then reveal 3 cards. If you have the talisman on your side of the board and reveal Rule New Orleans, you win. Sounds easy, right? Well, some cards will trigger before that happens. Spirits. Spirits work as an ally or an item, but can turn on you in the blink of an eye. Will luck be on your side? Evil Queen doesn't have a vanquish action, but can brew poison. Keep poison tokens separate from power so you don't mix them up. Anyhow, you also start with the Dwarf's Cottage locked. When you have played the 4 ingredients, triggering an ability with each one, remove the lock. Once Snow White appears, deal with her like with all others in your way. Have them take a bite from a poisoned apple. Hades wants to get those titans out and over to Mount Olympus ASAP. If a hero gets in your way, give them mortality poison so you can get rid of them easier. Titans can help fight them, but then, like allies, are discarded, which goes against your win condition. Titans can also be trapped, meaning you turn them sideways. Their ability is cancelled, and they can't move or fight until they are untrapped. Dr. Facilier wins if he is the talisman in his possession and reveals Rule New Orleans after playing The Cards Will Tell. Evil Queen wins if she poisons Snow White. Hades wins if he starts his turn with 3 untrapped titans at Mount Olympus. Move your villain, take actions, and do what it takes to fulfill your objective while doing whatever it takes to stop an opponent from fulfilling theirs. That's Disney Villainous Wicked to the Core. You can play Disney Villainous Wicked to the Core on a large rectangular coffee table. There's a bit of grade 2 or 3 reading, and players will need to understand how to maximize their turns and timing, plus manipulate the deck in order to get the cards they need. With all that said, I can't see it being especially difficult for experienced 8-year-old gamers. Game length depends on the cards and players, but expect your first few games to be 75 to 90 minutes. Once comfortable, games will range from 30 to 60 minutes. In our second game of Disney Villainous Wicked to the Core, I wasted no time in getting my ingredients out as the Evil Queen. Dad was gaining power, Mom already had Rule New Orleans in our fortune pile, and I had a hero to deal with. Me and Dad just piled cards on top of Mom's fortune pile to slow her down. A few turns later, I had the magic mirror out and Snow White was in my sights. Dad just happened to fate me, and the card allowed him to discard a card in my hand. Goodbye, take a bite. Snow White, you don't know how lucky you are. Dad was about a turn or 2 away from winning, so Mom took a chance with The Cards Will Tell. She had 14 cards in her fortune pile. She drew her 3 cards, and the third one she revealed was Rule New Orleans to win. Seriously? Me and Dad started laughing so hard. We couldn't believe it. I love that Disney Villainous Wicked to the Core is an expandalone. If you have the original game with its 6 characters, this adds 3 more to the mix. If you only have this, you can play with these 3 and decide later if you ever want more. The rulebook, guides, and reference are really good at preparing you for both the general gameplay and how to approach each character. It's handy not just for new gamers, but for people like us. I love the fate action. You're a villain, so of course you'll take it out on other players if they get in the way. The fact that you can't be fated consecutively is not only great design, but it can be a tiny bit of protection. Dr. Facilier's fortune pile is a really cool mechanism. He's willing to take risks to get what he wants. He knows he can be betrayed by the spirits, but doesn't care. He also generates so much power. We had to grab tokens from another box because of how much power he can gain throughout the game. Evil Queen's poisoning mechanism is brilliantly thematic. You're so powerful at the start, but then it slows down because you need to sneak around the shadows. You want to get rid of those annoying dwarfs. But then you might not have the take a bite card when Snow White is alone in the cottage. This is one of my favorite villains in the entire series. Hades is tricky because it takes a while to get going. He's the mirror of the Evil Queen. See what I did there? You'll want to keep a card in your hand so you can free trap Titans. Knowing when to get those Titans off and running is important because you can't take advantage of their ability. It can be a bit of a downer. I'm thankful that most games last under 60 minutes. Once games are over an hour, you have brawling games like Smash Up and Dice Throne as options, but also many classic games. I've always said that I wish games lasted around 45 minutes, but I still like this a lot. Maybe we just fate one another too much. Once you really know each character's mechanisms, games do tend to drop below an hour, which helps. Disney Villainous Wicked to the Core is a card game with take that, strategy, and a ton of replayability. If you or someone you know is a Disney fanatic, this is close to being a must-buy. Even if they don't know all the characters, I think a player could still have fun. Just don't come into this expecting strategy and skip it entirely if you prefer focusing on your game in peace.